What if the most powerful woman in the empire was also the most invisible? What if the crown on her head came not from ambition, not from family name, not even from choice, but from a divine setup hidden beneath years of silence? She was not born to rule. She was not trained to lead. She was not even safe to speak, and yet she became the voice that saved a people from extinction. Her name was Esther, and this is not just her story, it is ours. Our story begins far from royalty, far from power, in a land of displacement in the shadow of exile. The Jewish people had been conquered by Babylon, then handed over like property to the vast empire of Persia. Among them was a young girl named Hadassah, orphaned, raised by her older cousin Mordecai, living quietly in the capital city of Susa. She was taught to survive, to keep her head down, to blend in, but her name carried power. Hadassah, a name meaning myrtle tree, small, fragrant, resilient, rooted even in harsh soil to survive among Persians. She used her other name, Esther, meaning star. She had no idea that she would be asked to shine in the darkest night. The king of Persia at the time was Xerxes, a ruler known for extravagance and ego. He reigned over 127 provinces, from India to Kush. And like many powerful men unchecked, he wanted the world to see his greatness. So he threw a feast, a spectacle of wealth and glory that lasted for months. Gold cups, silk curtains, marble pillars, no expense spared, no limit to indulgence. At the climax of it all, he demanded one more display, his queen Vashti. But Vashti refused. She would not be paraded like an object, not even by the king. That no from her lips echoed through the empire and shook the throne itself. The men around the king panicked. They feared women everywhere would follow Vashti's example. So they convinced Xerxes to depose her, to silence her voice, to erase her from royal memory. And just like that, the throne was empty. Months passed, but the king's anger faded and he began to miss Vashti. Yet his advisors proposed something new. Let a search be made for the most beautiful virgins in the land. Let them be brought to the palace, prepared with oils and perfumes for 1 year, and presented to the king one by one, until he finds one pleasing in his eyes. It was not a love story, it was a system. And in this system, Esther was taken. She did not volunteer. She did not apply. She was chosen by force, removed from her home, stripped from her community, and thrown into a world ruled by appearance and silence. In the palace, Esther listened. She watched. She adapted. She found favor with Haggai, the official in charge of the harem, and she followed only what he advised. While other girls requested lavish garments and makeup, Esther took only what was offered. She waited her turn, not with desperation, but with quiet strength. And when she finally stood before Xerxes, something happened that no one expected. He saw her, not just her beauty, but her presence. And he placed the royal crown upon her head, making her queen of Persia. Now pause here, because this moment is not what it seems. A Jewish orphan girl, a displaced exile. Now the queen of the most powerful empire in the world. It sounds like a fairy tale. But this is not a fairy tale. It is a test of silence, a test of identity. Because Esther had not told anyone she was Jewish, Mordecai had warned her to keep it secret, and she obeyed. So here comes the question. Was Esther wise to hide her identity? Or was she betraying who she was? Was it strategy or self-protection? Let us bring this to you now. Have you ever felt the need to hide part of who you are, to protect yourself, to keep your job, to avoid conflict, to survive? Have you ever swallowed your truth because the room was too dangerous to be real? This is where Esther's story becomes painfully relevant. She was chosen for her beauty, but she would be tested for her courage. While Esther wore the crown in silence, her cousin Mordecai served at the king's gate. Faithful, alert, connected to the streets. One day he overheard a plot. Two of the king's guards were planning to assassinate Xerxes. Mordecai passed the information to Esther. Esther told the king, and the conspirators were executed. The incident was recorded in the royal chronicles, but no reward was given to Mordecai. At least, not yet. This detail, seemingly forgotten, would return at the perfect time, because destiny always keeps its appointments. Back in the palace, Esther continued to live in tension, loved by the king, but unable to reveal who she truly was, until one man's ego shattered everything. His name was Haman, a powerful official, promoted above all other nobles, arrogant, petty, and dangerous. The king ordered that all must bow to Haman, but Mordecai refused. He would not bend to evil, even in exile. This infuriated Haman, but instead of targeting one man, he plotted genocide. He told the king there was a certain people scattered throughout the empire, whose customs were different, whose loyalty was divided. He did not name them, but he convinced the king they were a threat. Xerxes handed Haman his signet ring and gave him power to write the decree. A date was chosen by casting lots, Purim, and the edict was sealed. On that day, every Jew in Persia, from young to old, men, women, children, would be slaughtered, their property plundered, their name erased. Now the silence could no longer protect her. Esther's people, her blood, her God, were marked for extinction. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and wept in the city square. He sent word to Esther, begging her to intervene, to go before the king, to plead for mercy. But Esther hesitated. All the king's officials knew. To enter his inner court without being summoned was death, unless he extended the golden scepter. And the king had not summoned her in 30 days. She sent this message to Mordecai, explaining her fear, her risk. But Mordecai's response was thunderous. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows? Maybe you were made queen for such a time as this. Let those words sink in, for such a time as this. Words that still ring in the soul of every woman who has ever stood between silence and justice, between safety and sacrifice. Esther took them in. Let them burn through her fear. And she answered, Go, gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. I and my maids will fast as well. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. 3 days pass. No word, no whisper, only fasting, only waiting, breathing in courage, breathing out fear. Esther stands at the edge of death, but not in chains. She walks there freely. She is clothed in royal robes, but ashes still cling to her soul. Every step from her room to the throne echoes with destiny. She does not know if she will survive the hallway, but she walks it anyway. The marble floor is cold. The guards turn their heads. The golden doors loom. Inside, the king sits on his throne, robed in authority, armored in law, guarded by pride. She enters. The court goes still. No one dares move. No one dares breathe. Will he raise the scepter or summon death? Time holds its breath. So does she. Then he lifts it. The golden scepter points to her, and with it, life. The king smiles. Queen Esther, what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be given to you. She speaks, but not to beg, not yet. If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come to a banquet I have prepared for him. Pause. Why a banquet? Why not just say it? Why not reveal the truth? Name the terror? Expose the plan? Is she afraid? Is she wise? Or is she listening for the whisper of God? Here the interpretations begin. Some say she hesitates out of fear. Some say the atmosphere wasn't ready. Some say God had placed a holy pause in her soul. What do you think? Have you ever had something urgent to say, but deep down felt, not yet? How many times have you stayed silent, not out of cowardice, but because you knew it wasn't time? Drop a comment below, because the line between fear and faith is razor thin right now. The king agrees. Haman is summoned. The banquet is held that very day. Esther sets the table, but she is preparing something far deeper. At the banquet, the king asks again, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you." But again, Esther waits. "If I have found favor in your sight, please come again tomorrow to another banquet I will prepare. Then I will answer." Haman leaves the banquet swollen with pride. He alone dined with the king and queen. He thinks he is rising. He thinks he is untouchable. But his pride is pierced, because at the gate he sees Mordecai, still not bowing, still not trembling, and it infuriates him. He goes home and brags to his wife and friends about his wealth, his status, his dinner with the queen, and his hatred for Mordecai. They advise, build a gallows, 75 feet high. In the morning, ask the king to hang Mordecai, then go enjoy your banquet. He agrees. The gallows go up. The noose swings. But God doesn't sleep. That night the king cannot sleep. Rest flees from him. He calls for the chronicles, the records of his reign, and has them read aloud. In those pages he hears of Mordecai, the man who uncovered a plot to assassinate the king. But Mordecai was never rewarded. The king sits up. What honor has been given him? Nothing. Just then, Haman enters, early, ready to request Mordecai's death. But the king speaks first. What should be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Haman, thinking it's him, answers eagerly, "Put him in royal robes, set him on the king's horse, let a noble lead him through the city, shouting, 'This is what is done for the man the king honors.'" The king nods. "Perfect. Do it all. For Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate." Haman is shattered, but he must obey. He robs Mordecai, leads the horse, lifts his voice in praise for the man he came to kill. This is the divine reversal. After the parade, Haman runs home in grief, covers his head, his pride crushed. His advisors whisper, "If Mordecai is a Jew, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall." Before he can respond, they rush him out the door. To Esther's second banquet. The stage is now fully set. The king, the queen, the accused. The wine flows. The food is served. But beneath it all, a deeper truth stirs. The king turns again. "Now, my queen, what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be yours." This time Esther doesn't pause. "If I have found favor, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life. That is my request. Spare my people. That is my desire. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we were merely sold as slaves, I would have remained silent. But no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king." The king is stunned. "Who is he? Where is this man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther points. "The adversary, the enemy, is this vile Haman." Let that moment settle. She speaks, finally, fully, at great cost. She names the evil, and in that moment, the silent queen becomes a roaring force of justice. The king rises in fury, storms into the garden, his mind spinning with betrayal. Inside, Haman begs Esther for mercy, falls at her feet. The king returns and sees him falling near the queen and roars, "Will he even assault the queen while she is with me in the house?" And that is the final blow. A servant steps forward. "There is a gallows 75 feet high beside Haman's house. He built it for Mordecai." The king says, "Hang him on it." And so, Haman dies on the very device he built for someone else. The curse he crafted comes crashing down on his own head. Haman was dead, But the danger was not, because the law he had written, the decree to annihilate the Jews, was still active, still legal, still irreversible by Persian rule. The date of destruction had already been set. The order still bore the king's seal. Esther had stopped the hand that held the knife, but the blade still hung in the air. And so, she prepared to risk her life again. She approached the king a second time, uninvited, still under the same threat of death, still bearing the same fear, but now fueled by purpose. She fell at his feet, weeping, pleading for the lives of her people. The king, moved by her courage, extended the golden scepter again, and she rose, not as a girl in fear, but as a woman in war. She asked for a new decree that would allow the Jews to defend themselves on the day they were to be destroyed. The king agreed and issued the order. Messengers were sent out across the empire, from the greatest cities to the smallest villages. The message was clear: you are not alone. You are not helpless. You are allowed to rise, to fight, to live. And when the day of destruction came, the tables turned. The Jews defended themselves and prevailed. In every province, in every region, those who sought to kill them were stopped. Fear of Mordecai spread, for he had been promoted, raised to the highest position under the king. The man once ignored at the gate now carried the royal seal. The gallows built for him now stood as a monument to justice, and the people who were meant to be erased now celebrated with joy. That day became a festival, a remembrance of reversal, of courage, of survival. They called it Purim, named after the lots that had been cast to seal their fate, because what was meant to destroy them became the very thing that marked their deliverance. And Esther, she was no longer hidden, no longer silent, no longer afraid. She was a woman who had spoken truth to power, who had used her place not to protect herself, but to protect others. She had become a queen of deliverance. Now let us come closer. Let us ask the deeper question: what does this have to do with us? Because Esther's story is not just about royal palaces and ancient decrees. It is about every woman who has ever been caught between two identities, between what the world expects and who she truly is. It is about every woman who has been told to keep quiet, to not take up space, to survive by shrinking. It is about every woman who has faced a moment of terrifying clarity where she must decide, if I perish, and still chooses to rise. Esther was not brave because she lacked fear. She was brave because she moved forward anyway. She did not wait for perfect timing. She stepped into dangerous timing and made it divine. She did not have all the answers. She did not have all the power. She had only her truth and the courage to speak it. And that was enough to save a nation. So now we turn to you. What is the truth you are afraid to speak? What is the moment you have been born for? What is the silence that must be broken for someone else to live free? Because maybe you are Esther. Maybe you are the woman chosen for such a time as this. Not because you asked for it, not because you feel ready, but because someone needs what only you can carry: your voice, your perspective, your fire. So we invite you now to take part in this story. Tell us, have you ever had your own throne room moment? Have you ever been called to speak up, even when it was costly? Share your story below. Let this be a space where women lift women, where courage is contagious, where silence becomes strength. Like this video if Esther's journey stirred something in you. Share it if someone you love needs to be reminded that her voice matters. And subscribe to Women in the Bible, because these are not just stories of the past. They are mirrors of the present and blueprints for the future. Esther began hidden, silent, afraid. She ended remembered, respected, and unshakably powerful. And maybe that is your story too.